Within the gleaming walls of a skyscraper that touches the clouds, where ambition meets reality and dreams are forged or shattered, there's a story that's been kept in the shadows for far too long. It's not just a story about office politics or career advancement. It's a tale of identity, power, and the lengths one will go to maintain control over a world that's slipping through their fingers. This is the story of a woman, strong, determined, and biracial, who has spent years proving herself in a world that wasn't built for her. She's done everything right, worked harder than anyone else, and yet, when it comes time to recognize her efforts, she finds herself overlooked, sidelined, and made to question her own worth. But this isn't just about her lack of promotion. It's about the reason why. In the eyes of the man who holds her future in his hands, she represents everything he's tried to keep out of his perfect, orderly world. Her skin, a unique blend of black and white, is a constant reminder of the change he fears, a change that threatens to upend the carefully maintained balance of power he relies on. To him, promoting her would be admitting that the world is moving on without him, that the old ways are dying and new ones are taking their place. But she's not just a pawn in his game, she's a force of nature, a symbol of the future he can't escape. And as the two of them clash, what starts as a simple office conflict becomes a battle for the soul of the company. It's a battle where the stakes are higher than anyone realizes, where every word, every action, is a step toward an inevitable confrontation. This is not just a story of a woman fighting for her place. It's a story of a world in transition, a world where the old ways are giving way to the new, where the shadows of prejudice are slowly being banished by the light of progress. And as we follow her journey, you'll see that this isn't just about one person's struggle. It's about a fight that echoes in every corner of our society. Come with me, because what you're about to witness is more than just a story. It's a revelation, a moment of truth that will challenge everything you thought you knew about power, privilege, and the fight for equality. And when the dust settles, you might just find that the world you knew is changing faster than you ever imagined. The room is dimly lit, not by accident, but by design. It creates an atmosphere of quiet power, an unspoken declaration of authority that the man behind the desk wears like a tailored suit. He is the CEO, a man who has climbed his way to the top, leaving a trail of those who underestimated his ruthlessness. To the world, he is a respected leader, the kind of man who commands boardrooms and inspires fear and admiration in equal measure. But beneath the polished exterior lies a mind warped by prejudice and an insatiable need for control. He has always seen women as tools, objects to be used for his pleasure and discarded when their usefulness expires. But there is a particular thrill he gets from black women. In his twisted psyche, they represent a challenge, a conquest that feeds into his grotesque sense of superiority. He despises their confidence, their resilience, their very existence in his world. Yet the thought of subjugating them, reducing them to nothing more than his playthings, brings a sickening satisfaction. For him, it's not just about the act, it's about power. Raw, unchecked power. The act of sleeping with these women is his way of degrading them, a perverse form of glorification that only he understands. He relishes in the duality of his actions, pretending to offer them a glimpse of his world, only to shatter their spirits when they resist. The more they fight, the more he enjoys crushing them, both physically and emotionally. There is no guilt, no remorse. To him, these women are beneath him, existing solely for his amusement. Their pain, their humiliation, these are the things that fuel his ego, reaffirming his belief in his own supremacy. It is this mindset that drives his decisions, both in the boardroom and in the bedroom. As he sips his drink, his thoughts drift to one particular woman, her, the biracial employee who has worked under him for years, a woman of remarkable skill and intelligence who has repeatedly proven herself in every task thrown her way. Yet she remains in her position, never advancing, never being given the opportunities she deserves. The reason is simple in his mind. She doesn't belong. Her skin, a blend of black and white, is enough to remind him of the divide he cherishes so deeply. She intrigues him, not because of her competence, but because of her resistance. She has always been polite, respectful even, but there is an underlying strength in her that he finds infuriating. She doesn't grovel, doesn't play the game the way others do, and worst of all, she doesn't succumb to his advances. He recalls the last time he called her into his office. He had hinted at a promotion, a carrot dangled just out of reach, but only if she would play along. Her refusal had been swift, her expression betraying nothing but professionalism. But he saw it, the flash of disgust in her eyes, the barely contained revulsion. It was that moment that solidified his decision. She would stay exactly where she was, a reminder that no matter how hard she worked, she would never be more than what he allowed her to be. In his mind, it's her own fault. She had a choice, to submit and perhaps gain a little more, or to resist and remain stuck. Her refusal is a slight against him, an insult that he won't soon forget. And so he keeps her in place, ensuring that she sees others, less qualified, move ahead while she remains stagnant. It is a silent punishment, one that he administers with perverse pleasure. As the CEO, he has the power to shape destinies, and he has chosen hers. She is nothing more than another notch in his belt, another woman who dared to stand against him and lost. But what he doesn't realize is that every decision he makes, every act of cruelty is slowly unraveling the facade he has so carefully constructed. As the CEO leans back in his chair, the leather creaking under his weight, he contemplates his next move. The anticipation curls in his chest like a coiled serpent, tightening with every thought of her. He knows she'll be in her office now, diligently working as always, unaware of the summons that will soon come. He presses a button on the intercom, his voice smooth and controlled. "Send her in." The seconds tick by, each one a deliberate reminder of his control over her time, her actions, her very presence in this building. She arrives at the door shortly after, her knock firm but restrained, a testament to the professionalism she clings to like a lifeline in these moments. "Come in," he calls, his voice a blend of authority and thinly veiled amusement. She steps inside, her posture straight, her eyes meeting his with a calmness that belies the tension simmering beneath the surface. There is a grace to her movements, a quiet dignity that only heightens his perverse pleasure. Her skin, a rich amalgamation of her mixed heritage, gleams under the soft office lighting, an unwelcome reminder of the divide he despises so much. "Take a seat," he offers, gesturing to the chair opposite his desk. She hesitates, just for a fraction of a second, before complying. It's a small victory in his eyes, a crack in the facade of her composure that he relishes. "Thank you," she replies, her voice measured and calm, revealing nothing of the unease she must feel. He doesn't respond immediately, letting the silence stretch out, thickening the air between them. It's a tactic he's perfected over the years, a way to assert dominance, to remind her who holds the power in this room. Finally he speaks, his tone deceptively gentle. "You've been here a long time," he begins, his eyes narrowing slightly as he watches her reaction. "You've done well, very well in fact." She inclines her head slightly, acknowledging the praise without falling into the trap of flattery. "I've always done my best to meet the company's expectations. And yet," he continues, leaning forward just enough to invade her space, "you're still in the same position you were 5 years ago. I can't help but wonder why that is." The question hangs in the air, loaded with insinuation. It's a cruel jest, one she understands all too well. He knows exactly why she hasn't been promoted, just as she does. But this is his game, his twisted way of making her confront the reality of her situation. She meets his gaze, unflinching. "I believe I've proven my capability and commitment to this company. If there's something more I need to do, I'm open to feedback." Her response is precise, measured, devoid of any hint of the bitterness she feels. It's a masterstroke of professionalism, one that would have impressed any other executive. But to him, it's just another challenge, another opportunity to push her until she breaks. He smiles, but there's no warmth in it. "Feedback? Yes, of course." He pauses, his eyes drifting over her, as if considering something profound. "But sometimes it's not just about what you do, it's about what you're willing to do." The insinuation is clear. the air between them crackling with unspoken tension. It's a line he's towed before, a boundary she's refused to cross. But he's nothing if not persistent. She doesn't flinch, doesn't give him the satisfaction of a reaction. "I'm willing to do whatever it takes to further the company's goals," she replies evenly. His smile widens, turning almost predatory. "I'm glad to hear that." He rises from his chair, moving around the desk to stand beside her. The space between them shrinks, and she can feel the heat of his presence, the weight of his gaze on her skin. "You know," he murmurs, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial whisper, "there are certain things that can't be achieved through hard work alone." The words are a knife in the gut, twisting with every breath. She's heard them before, in different variations, from different men, but none have held the power this one does. He's not just any man, he's the CEO, the one who controls her fate in this company. She remains still, her back straight, refusing to be intimidated. "I believe that hard work should be the only requirement for advancement," she says quietly, but with an edge that betrays her resolve. He chuckles, a dark sound that echoes in the silence of the room. "You're a stubborn one, aren't you? I like that, but stubbornness can only get you so far." He leans in closer, his hand resting on the back of her chair, trapping her in place. The scent of his cologne, strong, overpowering, invades her senses, making her stomach turn. "You're a smart woman," he continues, his voice a low purr. "You know how the world works. There's no need to make this harder than it needs to be." There it is, the ultimatum she's been expecting, the thinly veiled demand wrapped in a veneer of benevolence. He's offering her a choice, but it's no choice at all. Submit, and she might move up the ladder. Resist, and she'll remain where she is, stuck, stagnant, overlooked. She inhales deeply, drawing on every ounce of strength she has. "With all due respect," she says, her voice steady, "I believe my work speaks for itself. If that's not enough, then perhaps I'm in the wrong company." His eyes narrow, and for a moment she wonders if she's gone too far. But then he smiles again, a slow, calculated smile that sends a shiver down her spine. "Perhaps you are," he says softly, almost too softly. "But remember, the door doesn't swing both ways. If you leave, you won't be coming back." The threat is clear, and she knows he means it. But she's come too far, worked too hard, to let him win now. She rises from her seat, matching his height as she looks him in the eye. "I'll keep that in mind," she says, her tone respectful but firm. For a long moment they stand there, locked in a silent battle of wills. Then, finally, he steps back, giving her space. "You may go," he says, his voice clipped, the friendly facade gone. She doesn't hesitate. With a nod, she turns and walks out of the office, her heart pounding in her chest. The moment the door closes behind her, she releases a breath she didn't realize she was holding. The encounter has left her shaken, but not broken. If anything, it has only strengthened her resolve. She knows now, without a shadow of a doubt, that she'll never get ahead in this company, not as long as he's in charge. But she also knows that she won't let him defeat her. She'll find another way, another path to success, one that doesn't involve compromising her integrity or dignity. As she walks down the hallway, the echo of his words follows her, a reminder of the battle she's just fought and the ones still to come. But she refuses to let them define her. She's stronger than that, stronger than him, and she'll prove it. Back in his office, the CEO watches her leave, a sneer curling his lips. He's won this round, but the victory feels hollow. There's something about her, something he can't quite put his finger on, that unsettles him. Perhaps it's the way she refused to back down, the way she looked him in the eye without a trace of fear. Or perhaps it's the realization that, despite all his power, he hasn't broken her. Yet. But it doesn't matter. He's a patient man. He knows that eventually everyone has a breaking point, and when she reaches hers, he'll be there, ready to remind her who's in control. For now, though, he'll let her believe she's won. It makes the final victory all the sweeter. The tension between them is palpable, a silent battle waged with words and unspoken threats. Every interaction, every exchange, is a test of wills, a contest of strength that neither is willing to lose. And as they continue to clash, the stakes rise ever higher, each encounter leaving both more determined than before. Yet beneath it all there is a dark truth, a truth that she knows but refuses to acknowledge. Her lack of promotion is not due to her abilities or her work ethic. It's because of who she is, the color of her skin, the heritage she cannot change. And while she fights to prove herself, he fights to keep her in her place, to remind her that no matter how hard she tries, she'll never be more than what he allows. It's a battle she cannot win, at least not in the traditional sense. But that doesn't stop her from trying, from pushing back against the walls he's built around her. Every day she comes to work. She defies him with her very presence, her refusal to bow to his demands. And every day he finds new ways to remind her of her place, to assert his dominance in ways both subtle and overt. But even as they clash, there's a part of him that's drawn to her strength, her resilience. It's a part of him he despises, a weakness he cannot afford. And so he doubles down, pushing her harder, testing her limits in the hopes of breaking her once and for all. Yet as the days turn into weeks, and the weeks into months, he begins to realize that she's not like the others. She's stronger, more determined, more infuriating. No matter what he does, she remains unbroken, her spirit intact, her resolve unwavering. And it's this realization that fills him with a cold, simmering rage. He cannot allow her to win, cannot allow her to walk away unscathed. She has to be punished, has to be made an example of. But how? How can he break her without breaking himself in the process? The answer comes to him in a moment of clarity, a solution so simple, so perfect, that he wonders why he didn't think of it before. He'll use her own strength against her, turn her determination into her downfall. It's a tactic he's used before, one that has never failed, and he's certain it won't fail now. But as he sets his plan into motion, he can't shake the feeling that he's underestimated her, that she's more than she seems. And as the days go by, as the tension between them reaches a boiling point, he begins to realize that perhaps, just perhaps, he's not as in control as he thought. But by then, it's too late. The die is cast, the game set in motion, and as they move closer to the inevitable confrontation, both know that only one can emerge victorious. For her, it's a battle for survival, for dignity, for the right to exist as she is. For him, it's a battle for control, for power, for the satisfaction of knowing that he's still the master of his own world. But in the end, there can be only one winner. And as the final confrontation looms, both are prepared to do whatever it takes to come out on top. The die is cast and the game is set in motion. The unspoken battle between them has escalated into a silent war, a conflict where the rules are dictated by power, prejudice, and an unyielding determination to either maintain or dismantle the status quo. He sits behind his desk, the symbol of his authority looming large over everything in the room. The mahogany wood, polished to a sheen, reflects the dim light like a mirror that only reveals the surface, never the depth. It's a fitting metaphor for his world, pristine, untarnished on the outside, yet dark and twisted beneath the veneer of respectability. In the days that follow their last encounter, he watches her with renewed intensity. She moves through the office with the same quiet dignity, her presence a constant reminder of the thing he despises most, the color of her skin. It's not just that she's biracial, it's that her very existence is a defiance of the rigid boundaries he holds dear. She is a living contradiction, a blend of two worlds he believes should never coexist. To him, her skin is a stain on the fabric of his carefully curated world, a mark that no amount of scrubbing or ignoring can remove. It's a reminder that no matter how high he climbs, how much power he amasses, there are things beyond his control, things like heritage, identity, and the immutable truth of who someone is. And it infuriates him. He sees it every time he looks at her, that blend of black and white, a fusion that defies the binary world he wishes to impose. Her skin is a constant challenge, a silent provocation that she carries without apology. It's not just a color. It's a symbol of everything he fears, everything he cannot dominate. And so he lashes out in the only way he knows how, by exerting his power, his control, over every aspect of her professional life. She, on the other hand, navigates the office with a quiet strength, her every move a testament to her resilience. She knows what he's doing, knows that her lack of promotion has nothing to do with her performance and everything to do with the skin she was born with. But she refuses to let it break her. Each day she walks into the building is an act of defiance. Each task she completes a statement of her worth. There's a quote she often thinks of, an allusion to the great poet Langston Hughes. I too am America. It's a reminder that despite the obstacles, despite the prejudice, she belongs here just as much as anyone else. Her skin is not a curse, but a badge of honor, a testament to her heritage and her place in this world. It is the source of her strength, the root of her identity. But to him, it's a target. He begins to notice the small things, the way she carries herself, the way she interacts with her colleagues, the respect she commands without ever demanding it. It's not just her work that sets her apart. It's her presence, the quiet confidence that seems to seep from her very pores. And it drives him mad. She's like a statue carved from marble, smooth and unyielding, her features chiseled with a precision that speaks to the artistry of her ancestry. But in his eyes, that marble is flawed, tainted by the mix of colors that should never have come together. He sees her as an affront to the natural order, a disruption in the symmetry of his world. His mind, twisted by years of unchecked power and prejudice, begins to craft a new plan, one that will exploit the very thing that makes her unique. If her skin is a symbol, then he will turn it against her, use it to undermine everything she stands for. He will make it her weakness, her downfall. And so the campaign begins. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible to those not attuned to the nuances of office politics. He starts with the smallest of slights, the kind that could easily be brushed off as coincidences. A missed meeting invitation here, a delayed email there. But she knows better. She sees the pattern, recognizes the intent behind the actions. Each slight is a chisel, each omission a hammer, chipping away at the marble of her resolve. But instead of crumbling, she grows stronger. She adapts, adjusts, using her own intelligence and skill to navigate the traps he sets for her. It's a dance, a delicate ballet of power and resistance, where every step is a calculated move, every turn a response to his aggression. He watches her closely, waiting for the moment she'll falter, the moment she'll break. But it never comes. She continues to excel, continues to prove her worth despite the barriers he places in her path. It's as if her skin, the very thing he hates, is a shield, deflecting every blow he throws at her. This infuriates him further. He begins to escalate his tactics, moving from subtle undermining to outright sabotage. He assigns her impossible tasks, gives her deadlines no one could meet, all in an effort to push her to her breaking point. But she refuses to break. She takes each challenge in stride, her determination only growing stronger with each new obstacle. In a fit of frustration, he begins to lash out more openly, his prejudice no longer hidden behind a veneer of professionalism. He starts making offhand comments, thinly veiled insults that allude to her race, her heritage. He knows he's crossing a line, but he doesn't care. In his mind, she deserves it. She's dared to challenge him, dared to rise above the station he's assigned her, and for that, she must be put in her place. But she doesn't flinch. She meets his gaze head-on, her eyes unyielding, her voice steady. "With all due respect, sir," she says one day after yet another condescending remark, "I believe my work speaks for itself. My skin does not define my abilities, nor does it diminish my contributions to this company." Her words are like a slap in the face, a reminder that no matter how hard he tries, he cannot strip her of her dignity. She stands before him, unbowed, her very presence a rebuke to everything he believes in, and for the first time, he feels a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor of his certainty. But he pushes it aside, refusing to let her get the better of him. He doubles down on his efforts, determined to make her regret ever standing up to him. The office becomes a battlefield. Every interaction a skirmish in the larger war he's waging against her. And yet, she continues to fight back, not with aggression, but with a quiet resilience that seems to absorb every blow without giving an inch. She is a fortress, her walls unbreachable, her defenses impenetrable. He hurls everything he has at her, but she remains standing, her resolve as unyielding as the marble she embodies in his mind. The symbolism is not lost on her. She knows what he's trying to do, knows that he's using her skin as a weapon against her. But she refuses to let him win. Each time he throws a new challenge her way, she meets it head-on, drawing on the strength of her heritage, the legacy of resilience passed down through generations. It's in these moments that she thinks of her ancestors, the ones who came before her, who fought their own battles against prejudice and oppression. She is their descendant, their legacy, and she will not let their struggles be in vain. Her skin, a blend of black and white, is not a weakness. It's a testament to their survival, their triumph over the forces that sought to erase them. And so she stands firm, a symbol of defiance in the face of his hatred. Every word he throws at her, every insult, every slight, is met with the same unyielding strength. She is a reflection of the world he wishes to deny, a reminder that the lines he tries to draw are nothing more than illusions. The tension between them reaches a boiling point, the office becoming a pressure cooker of unspoken conflict. The other employees notice, of course. They see the way he singles her out, the way she refuses to back down. But they say nothing, caught in the crossfire of a war they do not understand. A war that goes beyond mere office politics. It's a war of ideologies, of beliefs, of two worlds colliding in a space too small to contain them both. On one side, there is the CEO clinging to the old order, the rigid hierarchies that define his world. On the other, there is she, the embodiment of a new world, a world where boundaries are blurred, where identities are complex and multifaceted. The symbolism of their struggle is not lost on her. She knows that this is more than just a battle for her promotion. It's a battle for her identity, for her right to exist in this space as she is without compromise. And she is determined to win. But as the days turn into weeks and the weeks into months, she begins to feel the strain. The constant barrage of challenges, the relentless pressure, takes its toll. There are days when she doubts herself, when the weight of his hatred feels too heavy to bear. But in those moments, she draws strength from within, from the knowledge that she is fighting not just for herself, but for all those who came before her, and for those who will come after. She thinks of the great leaders and thinkers who fought for civil rights, who challenged the very systems that now seek to hold her back. She thinks of the poet Maya Angelou, whose words echo in her mind. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. And rise she does. Each day she comes to work with renewed determination, refusing to let him see her falter. She knows that every step she takes, every victory she wins, is a blow against the walls he's built around her. And slowly those walls begin to crack. It's in the small victories that she finds strength, the successful completion of an impossible project, the praise from a colleague, the quiet acknowledgement of her skills by those who see beyond the color of her skin. These moments are like rays of sunlight breaking through the clouds, reminders that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. The CEO sees these cracks too, and it terrifies him. He's losing control, losing the battle he thought he could win so easily. And in his desperation, he begins to make mistakes. His once subtle tactics become more overt, his prejudice more blatant. He starts to lose the support of those around him, his actions becoming too difficult to justify, even to himself. But still, he refuses to back down. He cannot allow her to win, cannot allow her to rise above the limitations he's imposed. It's not just about her anymore. It's about everything he stands for, everything he believes in. To let her win would be to admit that he was wrong, that the world he's fought so hard to maintain is crumbling beneath his feet. And so, the battle rages on, each day bringing them closer to the inevitable confrontation. She knows it's coming, the moment when everything will come to a head, when she'll have to face him once and for all. But she's ready. She's prepared herself for this fight, knowing that it's not just her career on the line, but her very identity. She thinks again of the greats, of those who fought before her, who stood in the face of hatred and refused to back down. She is their descendant, their legacy, and she will not let them down. The final confrontation comes on a day like any other, unremarkable in its beginnings, but monumental in its outcome. She's called into his office, the summons carrying a weight she can feel in her bones. This is it, the moment she's been preparing for, the moment when everything will be decided. She walks into the room with her head held high, her resolve unshaken. He's waiting for her, his expression a mask of cold detachment, but she can see the tension in his posture, the desperation in his eyes. He knows, as well as she does, that this is the endgame. The conversation starts off civil enough, a thin veneer of professionalism barely covering the hostility that simmers beneath the surface. He questions her work, her commitment, throwing out accusations that she deflects with ease. But then he shifts the focus, bringing the conversation back to where it started, to the color of her skin. "I've noticed," he says, his voice laced with condescension, "that you've been quite vocal about your heritage. You do realize, of course, that this is a professional environment. We don't need to bring personal issues into the workplace. It's a statement meant to undermine, to belittle." But she's ready for it. "With all due respect," she replies, her voice steady, "my heritage is not just a personal issue. It's a part of who I am, and it informs the way I navigate this world, including this workplace. If you see that as a problem, then perhaps it's not me who needs to reconsider their perspective." Her words hang in the air, a challenge that he cannot ignore. For a moment he falters, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the anger beneath. But he quickly regains his composure, leaning back in his chair as if to distance himself from the truth she's just spoken. "You've always been very opinionated," he says slowly, choosing his words carefully. "But in this company, we value results over rhetoric. Perhaps if you focused more on your work and less on these distractions, you'd find yourself in a better position." It's a final insult, a last-ditch effort to assert his authority. But she doesn't take the bait. Instead, she meets his gaze, her eyes unwavering. "My work speaks for itself," she says simply. "If that's not enough, then perhaps I'm in the wrong company." The words echo those she spoke to him months ago, but this time they carry a different weight. She's not just challenging him. She's ready to walk away, to leave behind everything she's worked for rather than compromise her integrity. And he knows it. He can see it in her eyes, the resolve that burns brighter than ever. She's won, and there's nothing he can do to change that. The realization hits him like a blow, knocking the wind out of his sails. For a moment, he's speechless, unable to comprehend how he's lost control so completely. But she doesn't wait for him to recover. She stands, her decision made, and turns to leave. As she reaches the door, she pauses, glancing back at him one last time. "I hope," she says quietly, "that one day you'll see that the color of my skin is not a barrier, but a strength. And maybe then, you'll understand what it truly means to lead." With that, she walks out, the door closing behind her with a finality that signals the end of their war. For a long moment, he sits there, staring at the closed door, his mind reeling. The room feels emptier than before, as if her presence had filled a space he didn't even realize was there. But now she's gone, and he's left alone with his thoughts, his power, and his prejudice. And for the first time, he feels something unfamiliar, something that tugs at the edges of his consciousness, demanding to be acknowledged. It's not guilt, not remorse. It's something more insidious, more uncomfortable. Doubt. He shakes it off, pushing the feeling aside. He's the CEO, the one who controls this company, this world. But even as he tries to reclaim his sense of authority, the doubt lingers, a shadow that will haunt him long after she's gone. Outside the office, she walks down the hallway with her head held high, her heart lighter than it's been in months. She's won, not just the battle, but the war. She's proven to herself and to him that she is more than the color of her skin, more than the limitations he tried to impose. She is strong, resilient, and unbreakable. And as she steps out of the building, leaving behind the walls that once tried to contain her, she knows that her journey is far from over. There will be more battles to fight, more wars to wage, but she's ready for them. If you've been moved by her story, if you've felt the tension, the struggles, and the ultimate satisfaction of seeing her rise above it all, then I invite you to stay with us. Stories like these are powerful because they reflect the realities so many of us face. The challenges of breaking through barriers, of standing tall in the face of prejudice, and of finding our place in a world that often seems determined to hold us back. But this is just one story among many, and there are countless more to be told. Stories of resilience, of triumph, of justice that we are passionate about sharing with you. By subscribing to our channel, you're not just staying up to date with our latest content. You're joining a community of individuals who believe in the power of storytelling to inspire, to challenge, and to create change. So if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. This way you'll never miss an update, and you'll be the first to know when we bring you more stories that matter. We're just getting started, and there's so much more to explore together. Let's keep this journey going, because your story, our stories, are worth telling. Thank you for being part of this with us. We can't wait to see you continue. The door closed behind her with a sense of finality, a symbolic end to a chapter that had defined her life for far too long. She walked down the hallway, her steps light, her posture tall, embodying the quiet strength that had carried her through the battles she never should have had to fight. The walls of that office building, once a fortress of oppression, now felt distant, as though they were finally releasing their hold on her spirit. As she exited the building for the last time, the crisp air hit her face, invigorating her with the promise of something new, something better. She knew that her journey was far from over. She had faced the challenges in that space, not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been told they were not enough because of the color of their skin. And now she was ready to find a place where her talents and identity would be celebrated, not stifled. Her resolve hardened as she walked away from the company that had tried to limit her. She was done with being overlooked, done with fighting against a system that refused to see her worth. Now it was time to find a place where she could thrive, where she would be valued for her skills, her experience, and her heritage. Months passed as she transitioned into a new phase of her life. The interviews came and went, but she was careful now, careful not to settle for just any position, careful to find a company that aligned with her values. Her diligence paid off when she received an offer from a firm renowned for its commitment to diversity and inclusion. This was not just a token effort to meet quotas. It was a company where diversity was woven into the fabric of the workplace, where every voice was valued and every perspective mattered. Her first day at the new company felt like a breath of fresh air. From the moment she walked through the doors, she noticed the difference. The environment was welcoming, open, and filled with a vibrancy that she hadn't experienced in years. The diversity was visible not just in the faces around her, but in the ideas that flowed freely in meetings and discussions. It was a place where her mixed heritage was not an anomaly, but a valuable part of the tapestry that made the company what it was. She settled into her role quickly, her natural abilities shining through in a place where she was finally given the space to grow. Her work was appreciated, her opinions sought out, and her presence respected. She found herself surrounded by colleagues who were as passionate as she was, not just about their work, but about creating an inclusive environment where everyone could succeed. It didn't take long for her talents to be recognized. Within a few months, she was promoted to a leadership position, a role that allowed her to influence the very policies that had drawn her to the company in the first place. Her new role was challenging, but it was also fulfilling in a way she had never experienced before. Here, she was not just a leader. She was a mentor, a role model, someone who could make a tangible difference in the lives of others who had faced the same struggles she had. The work was demanding, but it was the kind of work she had always dreamed of. Work that mattered, that had a purpose beyond just the bottom line. She was part of a team that was driving change, not just within the company, but in the wider industry. They were setting standards, breaking barriers, and proving that diversity was not just a buzzword, but a key to innovation and success. And she thrived. For the first time in her career, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The more she gave, the more she was rewarded. Not just with promotions and accolades, but with the satisfaction of knowing that her work was making a difference. Her new company quickly became a leader in the industry, not just for its financial success, but for its commitment to creating a workplace where everyone could bring their whole selves to work. She was at the forefront of that change, using her experiences to guide her decisions, to create a culture that valued every individual for who they were. As she climbed the ranks, she never forgot where she came from. Her journey had been long and difficult, but it had shaped her into the leader she was now. She drew strength from her past, using it to fuel her drive to make the future better for those who would follow in her footsteps. Back at her old company, the CEO continued with his ways, untouched by the departure of the woman who had once challenged his authority. In his mind, he had won. She was gone, and the status quo had been preserved. He continued to run his company with the same iron grip, his prejudice as deeply entrenched as ever. To him, diversity was a threat, an intrusion into the carefully controlled environment he had cultivated over the years. He saw no need to change, no reason to question the beliefs that had guided him for so long. In his world, power was absolute, and he wielded it with the certainty of a man who had never been truly challenged. The departure of one employee, no matter how capable she was nothing more than a blip on his radar, a minor inconvenience that had been dealt with. He continued to surround himself with people who echoed his views, who reinforced his belief that the world was divided along lines that should never be crossed. His company remained profitable, but it was stagnant, caught in a time warp where innovation was stifled by the need to maintain control. The world outside his office was changing, but he refused to see it. Companies that embraced diversity were thriving, attracting the best talent and leading the way in an increasingly globalized market. But in his mind, these were anomalies, exceptions to the rule that had served him so well for so long. He watched as new companies emerged, led by a generation that valued inclusion, that saw strength in diversity. But instead of adapting, he dug in his heels, convinced that his way was the only way. And so his company continued to plod along, profitable but unremarkable, a relic of a bygone era. Meanwhile, she continued to rise. Her success became a beacon for others, a testament to what could be achieved when talent was recognized regardless of race or background. She became a sought-after speaker, sharing her story at conferences and events, inspiring others to follow in her footsteps. Her influence extended beyond her company. She was invited to join advisory boards, to consult with other organizations on how to create more inclusive workplaces. Her voice carried weight, her words were listened to, and her actions had a ripple effect that spread far beyond the walls of her office. In her new role, she found a sense of purpose that had eluded her for so long. She was not just building a career, she was building a legacy, one that would pave the way for future generations to succeed where she had once struggled. She was determined to ensure that the doors that had been closed to her would be opened wide for those who came after. And as her influence grew, so did the impact of her work. She was not just a leader, she was a trailblazer, a pioneer in a movement that was changing the face of corporate America. Her success was not just her own, it was a victory for everyone who had ever been told that they didn't belong, that they weren't enough. She looked back on her journey with a sense of pride, knowing that she had turned every obstacle into an opportunity, every challenge into a stepping stone. The battles she had fought had not been in vain. They had shaped her into the leader she was today, and they had laid the foundation for the victories yet to come. In the end, both she and her former CEO found themselves exactly where they belonged. She had broken free from the chains that had once held her down, rising to heights she had only dreamed of. Her journey had been one of struggle, but also of triumph. A journey that had taken her to a place where she could be her true self, where she could succeed on her own terms. The CEO, meanwhile, remained trapped in his own prejudices, unable to see the world beyond his narrow view. His company continued to exist, profitable but unremarkable, a relic of a time that was slowly but surely fading away. He was a man who had chosen to stay in the past, even as the future marched on without him. Their stories were a study in contrasts, a tale of two paths, two outcomes, shaped by the choices they had made. She had chosen to rise above, to embrace her identity and use it as a source of strength. He had chosen to cling to the old ways, to see the world in black and white, and in doing so had consigned himself to irrelevance. Epilogue: The Meeting of Two Worlds. The conference room was a fortress of glass and steel, suspended high above the bustling city. The world below moved with a sense of purpose, oblivious to the quiet tension brewing within the walls of the corporate giant's headquarters. The room, with its panoramic view of the skyline, was a testament to the power and influence that once seemed unshakable. Yet today, that power would be tested in ways it had never anticipated. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, her eyes tracing the outlines of the city she had come to know so well. The light of the afternoon sun filtered through the glass, casting long shadows that stretched across the polished mahogany table. Those shadows seemed to echo the past, dark, elongated memories of a time when her presence in this building had been one of struggle and silent resistance. But now those shadows were just that, remnants of a past she had overcome. Her reflection in the glass was a juxtaposition of past and present, a woman who had once been overlooked, now standing tall in her success. She was no longer the employee waiting for acknowledgement. She was the leader, the decision-maker, here to finalize a contract that would significantly impact the company she had once served. The irony was not lost on her. The same company that had once tried to keep her down was now seeking her partnership, her approval. As she waited for the meeting to begin, she couldn't help but think of the journey that had brought her to this moment. It was as if the cityscape before her was an allegory for her life, a sprawling, complex network of roads, each one representing a choice, a challenge, a triumph. The skyscrapers that pierced the sky were the milestones she had achieved, rising above the adversity that had once seemed insurmountable. The door to the conference room opened with a soft click, breaking the silence. She turned to see the familiar figure of the CEO, her former CEO, enter the room. Time had etched new lines into his face, his once confident stride now tempered by the weight of years and the burden of unyielded prejudices. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with the unspoken history that lay between them. He paused for a moment, his eyes meeting hers across the table. It was a moment of quiet recognition, a silent acknowledgement of the paths they had taken. For him, it was a moment of reckoning, of confronting the reality that the woman he had once tried to suppress was now standing on equal footing with him, perhaps even above him. For her, it was a moment of reflection, of seeing the man who had once been the embodiment of all the barriers she had faced. But now, those barriers were nothing more than shadows in the past, powerless to affect her present. She was no longer the woman he could control. She was the leader of a successful company, one that had sought her guidance and expertise. They took their seats at opposite ends of the long table, a symbolic distance that mirrored the divide between their worlds. The glass table between them was a clear, cold barrier, a metaphor for the transparency she now demanded, and the reflection of the truth that could no longer be ignored. The discussion began with pleasantries, a formality neither was particularly invested in. He spoke with the practiced ease of a man who had navigated countless negotiations, but there was an edge to his voice, a subtle unease that betrayed his awareness of the shift in power dynamics. She, on the other hand, was calm and composed, her words measured and precise, each one a reminder of the competence that had brought her to this point. As they delved into the details of the contract, the conversation took on a rhythm, an exchange of proposals and counterproposals, of terms and conditions. But beneath the surface, there was an undercurrent of something deeper, a struggle for control, a test of wills. It was a battle not of words but of presence, of the unspoken power that each held in their own right. He tried to assert himself, to steer the conversation in a direction that favored his company, but each time, she gently but firmly redirected it back to the terms she had come to secure. It was a dance of diplomacy, one where she led with a quiet strength that left no room for doubt. She had learned well the art of negotiation, not just in boardrooms, but in life itself. And now she wielded that skill with the precision of a master. At one point, he attempted to evoke the old camaraderie they had once shared, or rather the facade of camaraderie he had used to mask his true intentions. "You know," he began, leaning forward slightly, as if to bridge the distance between them, "we always valued your work here. You were one of our best." She met his gaze steadily, her expression unyielding. "I valued my time here as well," she replied, her voice soft but firm. "It taught me the importance of knowing one's worth and not settling for less than what one deserves." There was no anger in her tone, no bitterness, only the calm assurance of someone who had moved beyond the need for validation from those who had once tried to diminish her. Her words hung in the air, a gentle rebuke that carried the weight of her experiences, of the battles she had fought and won. He nodded slowly, a flicker of something, regret perhaps or understanding, crossing his features, but it was gone as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the practiced neutrality of a man who had spent a lifetime guarding his emotions behind a wall of professionalism. The meeting continued, each passing minute reinforcing the shift in power between them. She was no longer the subordinate, the employee waiting for recognition. She was the equal, or perhaps, in this moment, the superior, guiding the terms of a deal that would benefit both companies, but on her terms. As the meeting drew to a close, they reviewed the final points of the contract. There was a moment of silence as they both looked over the documents, a pause that seemed to stretch on as they each absorbed the significance of what was about to be signed. For her, this contract was more than just a business agreement. It was a symbol of her journey, of the success she had achieved despite the obstacles placed in her path. It was a testament to her resilience, her determination to rise above the limitations others had tried to impose on her. For him, it was a moment of realization, of understanding that the world he had tried so hard to control was changing, moving beyond the confines of the old prejudices and power structures he had relied on. The woman sitting across from him was proof of that change, a living reminder that the future belonged not to those who clung to the past, but to those who embraced progress and inclusion. He signed the contract first, his pen moving across the page with a steady hand, though there was a slight tremor in his fingers that betrayed his inner turmoil. When he finished, he slid the document across the table to her, a gesture that was both an invitation and a concession. She took the pen, her movements fluid and confident, and added her signature to the contract. As she did, she couldn't help but feel a sense of closure, a realization that this moment was the culmination of everything she had worked for, the final chapter in a story that had begun with her struggle for recognition and respect. The contract was complete, the deal finalized. They exchanged polite nods, the formalities of business concluding what had been, in many ways, a personal journey for both of them. But even as the meeting ended, the impact of what had transpired lingered in the air, a silent acknowledgement that something fundamental had shifted between them. As she gathered her things and prepared to leave, he stood as well, walking her to the door. There was a moment of hesitation, a brief pause before he spoke. "I wish you all the best," he said, his voice sincere, if a bit resigned. She looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "Thank you," she replied, her tone warm but reserved. "I wish the same for you." And with that, she left the conference room, stepping out into the hallway and away from the world that had once tried to hold her back. The door closed behind her with a soft click, the finality of it echoing the end of an era, both for her and for the company she had once served. As she walked down the hallway, the shadows of the past receded, replaced by the bright light of the future she had forged for herself. The meeting had been a reminder of how far she had come, but it was also a testament to the fact that her journey was far from over. There were new challenges ahead, new opportunities to seize, and she was ready for them all. Back in the conference room, the former CEO stood alone, staring at the closed door for a long moment. The room, once filled with the tension of their unspoken history, was now quiet, the air heavy with the realization that he had just witnessed the embodiment of change, change that he had tried to resist, but that had ultimately triumphed. He returned to his seat, the documents before him now just pieces of paper, devoid of the power they once seemed to hold. He knew that this was not just the end of a meeting, but the end of something much larger. A shift in the world he had once controlled, a shift that was now beyond his grasp. But even as he faced this new reality, he couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The fight was over, and in its place was a new beginning, one that he would have to navigate with the understanding that the world had changed, and that those changes were here to stay. For her, the future was bright, filled with the promise of success and fulfillment in a place where she was valued for who she was. For him, the future was uncertain, a landscape he would have to learn to navigate without the old certainties he had relied on for so long. But in the end, they were both exactly where they were meant to be, each having walked their own path, each having arrived at a place that reflected the choices they had made. As she left the building, the sun was beginning to set, casting a warm glow over the city. The skyline, once a distant, unattainable dream, was now the backdrop to her success, a symbol of the heights she had reached and the obstacles she had overcome. And as she looked out at the city, she knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where she would continue to rise, to lead, and to inspire others to do the same. The shadows of the past were behind her, and in their place was the light of a future filled with endless possibilities. With a final glance back at the building that had once been her battleground, she turned and walked away, her steps confident, her path clear. The world was hers for the taking, and she was ready to embrace it. That's it, everyone. What do you think of her remarkable journey from being overlooked and underestimated to becoming a beacon of success and resilience? Which part of her story resonated with you the most? Was it the quiet strength she displayed in the face of relentless adversity, or the way she rose above it all to find a place where she could truly thrive? Her story is not just about overcoming obstacles. It's about breaking barriers and paving the way for others who face similar struggles. It's a powerful reminder that, no matter the challenges, perseverance and self-belief can lead to incredible opportunities and triumphs. Share your thoughts in the comment section below. How do you feel about the CEO's refusal to change, and what does that say about those who cling to outdated beliefs? Do you think his company will eventually crumble under the weight of its own stagnation? Or will he continue to maintain his grip on power? If her journey inspired you, let us know if there's another story of resilience, triumph, or justice you'd like us to explore next. Your voice matters in this community, and we'd love to hear what kind of stories you want to see more of. Don't forget to subscribe for more powerful narratives like this one, and make sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. We have many more stories of strength, courage, and justice coming your way. Stories that challenge the status quo and highlight the power of the human spirit. Until next time, remember, your identity is your strength and your journey is your own. Keep pushing forward, keep rising above, and keep striving to create the world you want to see. Thank you for being a part of this journey with us, and we can't wait to continue exploring these stories together. See you in the next one.